It's a freezing February evening in 2004. Snow blankets the winding roads of rural New Hampshire. A damaged black Saturn sits abandoned on Route 112. Its airbags deployed, its windshield cracked like a spider web. The driver's door hangs open. Personal belongings are scattered in the snow. But here's what makes your blood run cold. The driver has completely vanished. No footprints leading away from the scene. No trace of where they went. No explanation for how someone could disappear so completely in the middle of nowhere. In freezing temperatures, with nowhere to run. This isn't the opening scene of a thriller movie. This is the real-life disappearance of Maura Murray, a 21-year-old nursing student who evaporated from existence in 17 minutes. 17 minutes that have haunted investigators, her family, and amateur detectives for over 2 decades. What happened during those 17 minutes has become one of the most analyzed, debated, and mysterious missing person cases in American history. But to understand how Maura Murray vanished without a trace, we need to go back to the beginning. Maura Elizabeth Murray was born on May 4, 1982, in Hanson, Massachusetts. She was the fourth of 5 children in what appeared to be a close-knit family. Her father, Fred Murray, worked as a welder, and her mother, Lori, was a nurse. From the outside, the Murrays seemed like a typical middle-class American family. Maura was an exceptional student and athlete. She ran track in high school and was known for her competitive spirit and determination. These qualities served her well academically. She earned acceptance to the United States Military Academy at West Point, where she studied chemical engineering and continued running track. But West Point wasn't the right fit for Maura. After her sophomore year, she made the difficult decision to leave the prestigious military academy. She transferred to the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where she changed her major to nursing. By all accounts, she was thriving in this new environment. At UMass, Maura was a Dean's List student. She worked part-time jobs to help pay for her education. She was dating a fellow student named Billy Rausch, who was stationed at Fort Sill in Oklahoma for military training. Despite the distance, their relationship seemed solid. They talked regularly and made plans for their future together. But beneath this seemingly normal college life, there were signs that all was not well with Maura Murray. The first major incident occurred on February 5, 2004, just 4 days before her disappearance. Maura was working her job as a security guard at UMass when she received a phone call. Whatever was said during that conversation left her visibly shaken. Her supervisor found her in tears and so distraught that she couldn't continue working. She was excused from her shift and told to go home. Nobody knows who called Maura that night or what was said. The identity of the caller and the content of that conversation remain unknown to this day. But what happened next was even more troubling. The following evening, February 6th, Maura attended a party at her father's hotel room in Amherst. Fred Murray had driven up to visit his daughter and help her shop for a new car, as her current vehicle had been giving her problems. The father-daughter evening seemed normal enough. They looked at cars during the day and had dinner together. But sometime after midnight, Maura took her father's Toyota Corolla without permission. She was driving alone on Route 9 in Hadley, Massachusetts, when she crashed the car into some trees. The vehicle sustained significant damage. When police arrived at the scene, they found Maura visibly shaken but uninjured. Here's where things get strange. Maura couldn't explain what she was doing, driving alone at that hour. She couldn't provide a coherent account of how the accident happened. The investigating officer noted that she appeared to be under emotional distress, but she wasn't charged with any crime. The incident was classified as a single-car accident. Fred Murray was called to the scene. He arranged for the damaged Toyota to be towed and drove Maura back to her dorm. If he was angry about his daughter taking his car without permission and crashing it, he didn't show it publicly. Instead, he seemed more concerned about her emotional state. The car accident raised questions that would become more significant in hindsight. Why was Maura driving alone in the middle of the night? Where was she going? What was troubling her so deeply that she felt compelled to take her father's car without asking? These questions became even more pressing when you consider what happened just 3 days later. February 9th, 2004, started like any other Monday for Maura Murray. She attended her morning classes at UMass. She had lunch with friends. She worked out at the campus gym. To everyone around her, she seemed like a normal college student going about her daily routine. But Maura was planning something she had kept completely secret from everyone in her life. At 1 p.m., Maura emailed her professors with a fabricated story. She claimed there had been a death in her family, and she would need to be absent from classes for the next week. This was a complete lie. There was no family emergency. No one had died, but the emails bought her time and provided cover for what she was planning to do next. After sending the emails, Maura went to her job at the campus art gallery. She told her supervisor the same story about a family emergency and arranged to take time off from work. Again, she was believed without question. At 3:15 p.m., Maura drove to a local ATM and withdrew $280 in cash. This left her checking account nearly empty. She then drove to a nearby liquor store where she purchased a bottle of Kahlua, a bottle of vodka, and a 6-pack of beer. The alcohol purchase was significant because Maura was underage and had recently been caught using a fake ID at another establishment. Maura returned to her dorm room at Kennedy Hall and began packing. She gathered some clothes, toiletries, and personal items. She also printed out directions to Burlington, Vermont, and the Berkshires region of Massachusetts. These printouts suggested she was planning to travel to a mountainous area, possibly for skiing or hiking. But here's what makes this packing session so chilling. Maura also gathered up personal items that suggested she might not be planning to return. She packed all her favorite belongings. She took down personal photos from her dorm room walls. She even took her plants. At 4:37 p.m., Maura made her last known phone call. She contacted a condo rental company in Stowe, Vermont, inquiring about availability and rates. The conversation was brief, and she didn't make a reservation, but it provided another clue about her intended destination. By early evening, Maura Murray had loaded everything into her black 1996 Saturn sedan and left the UMass campus. She was last seen by her doormate around 4:30 p.m. Her car was spotted on surveillance cameras leaving the university area, heading north on Interstate 91. Where was Maura going? Why had she lied about a family emergency? Why had she withdrawn nearly all her money and purchased alcohol? And why did her packing suggest she might not be planning to return? These questions would become even more haunting when you realize that within hours, Maura Murray would crash her car on a lonely stretch of road in New Hampshire and disappear forever. The drive from UMass Amherst to the White Mountains of New Hampshire takes approximately 2.5 hours under normal conditions. Maura was familiar with the route. Her family had vacationed in the area when she was younger, and she had happy memories of the region. But as Maura drove north that evening, she was carrying more than just luggage and alcohol. She was carrying secrets that died with her disappearance. If you're finding this case as compelling as I am, and you want to see more deep dives into unsolved mysteries like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps me bring you more content like this. Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire is not a road you want to travel on a February night. It winds through the White Mountain National Forest, flanked by dense woods and steep embankments. Cell phone coverage is spotty at best. Houses are few and far between. If something goes wrong on this stretch of road, you're essentially on your own. At approximately 7:27 p.m. on February 9th, 2004, something went very wrong for Maura Murray. Her black Saturn hit a snowbank and several trees on the eastbound side of Route 112 just past the weathered barn. The impact was severe enough to deploy both airbags and cause significant front-end damage. The car came to rest, partially blocking the narrow road, its hazard lights blinking in the darkness. But here's what makes this crash scene so disturbing. By the time help arrived, the driver had vanished completely. The first person to notice the accident was a school bus driver named Butch Atwood. He was returning home from his route when he saw the damaged Saturn with its hazard lights flashing. Atwood pulled his bus over and approached the vehicle to offer assistance. He found a young woman standing near the car. She appeared to be uninjured but shaken. When Atwood asked if she needed help or wanted him to call police, the woman declined. She claimed she had already called 888 and that help was on the way. This was impossible. Cell phone service in that area was virtually non-existent, and there were no payphones nearby. Atwood later described the woman as appearing to be in her early 20s with dark hair. She was polite, but seemed anxious to get him to leave. Something about her demeanor made him uncomfortable. Despite her assurances that she had everything under control, Atwood decided to call 911 as soon as he got home. The bus driver's house was less than 100 yards away from the crash site. It took him approximately 2 minutes to walk from his bus to his front door. He immediately called the Grafton County Sheriff's Department to report the accident. This timeline becomes crucial to understanding what happened next. The 911 call was logged at 7:27 p.m. The first police officer, Sergeant Cecil Smith of the Haverhill Police Department, was dispatched immediately. Given the rural location and the fact that Smith was on patrol several miles away, it took him approximately 15 minutes to reach the scene. When Sergeant Smith arrived at 7:46 p.m., the Saturn was still there, still blocking part of the road, hazard lights still blinking, but the driver was gone, completely and utterly gone. Think about this timeline for a moment. Butch Atwood left the young woman at the crash site at 7:27 p.m. Police arrived at 7:46 p.m. That's a window of just 19 minutes. But remember, Atwood called 911 immediately after getting home, which took about 2 minutes. So the woman had maybe 17 minutes before police response was guaranteed. 17 minutes to disappear without a trace in freezing temperatures, in unfamiliar terrain, with no apparent means of transportation. Sergeant Smith's initial inspection of the scene raised more questions than answers. The driver's side door was unlocked. The keys were missing from the ignition. A damaged box of wine was found on the back seat, its contents partially spilled. A Coke bottle that smelled strongly of alcohol was discovered in the car. Personal items were scattered both inside the vehicle and in the surrounding snow. These included textbooks, clothing, toiletries, and the printed directions to Vermont and the Berkshires that Maura had prepared earlier that day. But here's what investigators found most significant. There were no footprints leading away from the car. The snow around the vehicle had been disturbed by the crash and the responding personnel, but there was no clear trail showing which direction the driver had gone. How does someone disappear from a crash scene without leaving footprints in the snow? Sergeant Smith immediately began a preliminary search of the immediate area. He walked the roadway in both directions, checking for any sign of where the driver might have gone. He examined the woods on both sides of the road, looking for broken branches or disturbed snow that might indicate someone had entered the forest. He found nothing. Additional officers arrived within the hour, and the search was expanded. They used flashlights to examine a wider area around the crash site. They checked with nearby residents to see if anyone had seen or heard anything unusual. They drove the surrounding roads looking for any trace of the missing driver. Still nothing. The New Hampshire Fish and Game Department was contacted to provide search and rescue expertise. They brought in tracking dogs the following day. The dogs were given scent articles from the vehicle and immediately picked up a trail leading east from the crash site along Route 112. But after approximately 100 yards, the trail went cold. The dogs lost the scent completely, as if the person they were tracking had simply vanished into thin air. Meanwhile, investigators were trying to piece together the identity of the missing driver. The Saturn was registered to Fred Murray of Bridgewater, Massachusetts. When contacted, Fred confirmed that his daughter Maura had been driving the vehicle. This was the same car that had been giving her mechanical problems, the reason for their car shopping trip just days earlier. Fred Murray received the call about his daughter's disappearance at approximately 3:00 a.m. on February 10th. The news hit him like a physical blow. His daughter, who he had just seen 3 days earlier, was missing under completely inexplicable circumstances. Fred immediately drove to New Hampshire to join the search efforts. When he arrived at the crash scene the next morning, he was struck by how remote and desolate the location was. Route 112 wasn't on any logical route from UMass to the destinations Maura had researched. Why had she been on this particular road? The investigation revealed more puzzling details about Maura's final day. Credit card records showed her ATM withdrawal and liquor store purchase. Her email accounts revealed the fabricated story about a family emergency. Her cell phone records showed that last call to the Stowe condo rental company, but they also revealed something else. Maura's cell phone had been used to check voicemail at 4:37 p.m. on February 9th, the same time as her last outgoing call. However, the phone had not been used since then. When investigators tried to ping the device to determine its location, they got no response. The phone appeared to be either turned off or destroyed. Her boyfriend, Billy Rausch, who was still stationed in Oklahoma, became frantic when he learned about Maura's disappearance. He immediately requested emergency leave and flew to New Hampshire to join the search. Billy told investigators that Maura had seemed troubled during their recent phone conversations, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what was bothering her. The last time Billy had spoken with Maura was on February 8th, the day before her disappearance. He described the conversation as normal, though he noted that she seemed distracted. They had made plans to talk again the following evening, but that call never happened. As word of Maura's disappearance spread, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Several people came forward to report seeing a young woman matching Maura's description in the days leading up to her disappearance. But these sightings were contradictory and geographically scattered. One witness claimed to have seen Maura at a gas station in Amherst on the afternoon of February 9th. Another reported seeing her at a convenience store in Woodsville, New Hampshire later that evening. A third witness said they saw a woman matching her description walking along Route 112 near the crash site, but none of these sightings could be definitively confirmed. Security cameras were checked, but the footage was either too grainy to be conclusive or had already been recorded over. The investigation also uncovered troubling details about Maura's recent behavior. Her friends revealed that she had seemed increasingly stressed in the weeks before her disappearance. Her academic performance, while still good, had declined slightly. She had been drinking more than usual and had seemed preoccupied with something she wouldn't discuss. There was also the matter of the fake ID incident. Just weeks before her disappearance, Maura had been caught using false identification at a local restaurant. The incident had been reported to university officials, and she was facing potential disciplinary action. Was this academic trouble enough to drive a Dean's List student to desperation? Or was there something else troubling Maura Murray that nobody knew about? The search efforts intensified as days turned into weeks. Professional search and rescue teams combed the White Mountain wilderness. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras flew grid patterns over the forest. Ground teams with specialized equipment searched caves, abandoned buildings, and remote trails. Local residents joined volunteer search parties. Flyers with Maura's photograph were distributed throughout the region. A reward fund was established for information leading to her whereabouts. But despite these extensive efforts, no trace of Maura Murray was found. Not a piece of clothing, not a footprint, not a single clue to indicate which direction she had gone or what had happened to her. The case began to attract national media attention. Television crews descended on the small New Hampshire town. Reporters interviewed anyone connected to the case. Maura's story was featured on missing person websites and television shows. With increased attention came increased speculation. Theories about what happened to Maura Murray began to multiply. Some believed she had run away to start a new life. Others suspected foul play. Still others thought she had succumbed to the elements while trying to walk for help. But each theory had problems. If Maura had run away, how had she managed to disappear so completely without money, identification, or a vehicle? If she had been the victim of a crime, why was there no evidence of a struggle at the crash scene? If she had died from exposure, why hadn't her body been found despite extensive searches? The investigation revealed one more crucial piece of information that deepened the mystery. Analysis of the Saturn's damage showed that the accident wasn't severe enough to cause serious injury. The airbags had deployed as designed, and there was no blood or other evidence of trauma inside the vehicle. This meant that Maura had likely walked away from the crash uninjured. But where had she walked to? And why? As the initial search efforts yielded no results, investigators began to focus on a more systematic analysis of the evidence. What they discovered only deepened the mystery surrounding Maura Murray's disappearance. The forensic examination of Maura's Saturn revealed several perplexing details. The car's odometer showed that it had been driven approximately 25 miles since Maura had last filled the gas tank. Given the distance from UMass Amherst to the crash site, this suggested she had driven directly to Route 112 without making any significant detours. But this raised another question. Why Route 112? The road wasn't on the most direct route to any of the destinations Maura had researched. If she was heading to Vermont or the Berkshires, there were faster, more direct routes available. Route 112 seemed like an odd choice, unless she had a specific reason for traveling that particular road. Investigators also discovered that Maura's car troubles had been more serious than initially thought. The Saturn had been having problems with the engine and transmission. Fred Murray later revealed that he had advised Maura to stop driving the car until it could be properly repaired. He had even offered to help her find a replacement vehicle, which was the reason for their car shopping trip on February 6th. This mechanical history added another layer to the mystery. If Maura knew her car was unreliable, why had she chosen to take a long trip in it? Was she planning to abandon the vehicle? Or had desperation driven her to risk traveling in a car she knew might break down? The investigation also uncovered details about Maura's personal relationships that painted a more complex picture of her emotional state. While her relationship with Billy Rausch appeared stable on the surface, there were signs of underlying tension. Billy was scheduled to visit Maura the weekend after her disappearance. They had been planning the visit for weeks, and Maura had seemed excited about it. But in their final phone conversations, Billy noted that she seemed distracted and less enthusiastic than usual about his upcoming visit. There were also revelations about Maura's family dynamics. While the Murrays presented a united front publicly, those close to the family knew there had been some recent tensions. Maura's parents had been having marital problems, and there had been discussions about separation. This family stress may have contributed to Maura's emotional state in the weeks before her disappearance. The phone call that had left Maura so distraught on February 5th remained a crucial piece of the puzzle. Despite extensive investigation, authorities were unable to determine who had called Maura that night or what had been discussed. Phone records showed an incoming call to Maura's work number, but the caller's identity couldn't be traced. Some investigators theorized that this phone call might have been the catalyst for everything that followed. Had someone threatened Maura? Had she received devastating news? Or had someone made her an offer that prompted her to plan her mysterious trip? As weeks turned into months without any breaks in the case, the investigation began to explore more unconventional theories. One possibility was that Maura had arranged to meet someone at or near the crash site. This would explain why she had chosen that particular route and why she had seemed anxious to get Butch Atwood to leave the scene. But if Maura had planned to meet someone, who was it? And why the elaborate deception about a family emergency? Why withdraw money and purchase alcohol if she was simply meeting a friend or acquaintance? Another theory focused on the possibility that Maura had been struggling with alcohol abuse. The presence of alcohol in her car, combined with the Coke bottle that smelled of liquor, suggested she might have been drinking while driving. Her recent use of a fake ID and the stress she had been under could have indicated a developing problem with alcohol. If Maura had been intoxicated at the time of the crash, it might explain her disorientation and poor decision-making. But it still didn't explain how she had managed to disappear so completely or why her body hadn't been found. The investigation also examined the possibility that Maura had been the victim of what's known as an opportunistic crime. This theory suggested that someone had happened upon the crash scene shortly after Butch Atwood left and had abducted Maura. Route 112, while remote, did see some traffic from local residents and occasional travelers. It was possible that someone with malicious intent had driven by at just the wrong moment. This would explain the lack of footprints and the complete absence of any trace of Maura. But this theory also had problems. The window of opportunity was extremely narrow. Any potential abductor would have had to arrive at the scene, convince or force Maura to get into their vehicle, and leave the area all within a matter of minutes. It was possible, but it required an almost impossible sequence of coincidences. As the first anniversary of Maura's disappearance approached, her family refused to give up hope. Fred Murray became a tireless advocate for his daughter, organizing search parties, maintaining contact with investigators, and keeping her story in the public eye. The Murray family also hired private investigators to conduct their own parallel investigation. These private investigators brought fresh perspectives and resources to the case, but they too were unable to uncover any definitive leads. The case began to attract the attention of amateur investigators and online communities dedicated to solving cold cases. Forums and websites sprang up where people could share theories, analyze evidence, and coordinate their own research efforts. This online community proved to be both a blessing and a curse for the investigation. On one hand, the increased attention kept Maura's case in the public consciousness and generated new tips and leads. On the other hand, the speculation and conspiracy theories sometimes hindered official investigation efforts and caused additional pain for the Murray family. Some online investigators became convinced that law enforcement had mishandled the initial response to Maura's disappearance. They pointed to what they saw as mistakes in the early investigation and suggested that crucial evidence had been overlooked or contaminated. These criticisms led to tensions between amateur investigators and official law enforcement. While some of the online research uncovered interesting details and alternative theories, it also generated a significant amount of misinformation and unfounded speculation. Years passed without any major breakthroughs in the case. Periodic searches of the White Mountain wilderness continued, but they yielded no new evidence. Tips and reported sightings were investigated, but none proved credible. The lack of progress was frustrating for everyone involved, but it was particularly devastating for the Murray family. The uncertainty of not knowing what happened to their daughter was a constant source of pain. They couldn't grieve properly because they didn't know if Maura was alive or dead. They couldn't move forward because they held on to hope that she might still be found. In 2019, 15 years after Maura's disappearance, New Hampshire authorities announced that they were treating the case as a criminal investigation rather than a missing person case. This shift suggested that investigators believed Maura had likely been the victim of a crime, though they didn't specify what evidence had led to this conclusion. The announcement brought renewed attention to the case and sparked new speculation about what investigators might have discovered. But it also didn't bring the family any closer to the answers they desperately sought. Today, more than 20 years after Maura Murray disappeared, her case remains officially unsolved. Despite thousands of hours of investigation, extensive searches, media coverage, and public interest, no one knows what happened to her during those crucial 17 minutes on Route 112. The case has become a touchstone for discussions about missing person investigations, the role of media in criminal cases, and the impact of unsolved mysteries on families and communities. It has inspired documentaries, podcasts, books, and countless online discussions. But behind all the theories and speculation is a simple, heartbreaking reality. A young woman with her whole life ahead of her vanished without a trace, leaving behind family and friends who may never know what happened to her. If this case has captivated you as much as it has millions of others, please subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. Your support helps me continue investigating these mysterious cases and bringing you the most thorough coverage possible. The Maura Murray case reminds us that even in our modern, connected world, people can still disappear completely. Despite all our technology, our investigative techniques, and our communication networks, some mysteries remain unsolved. What happened to Maura Murray on that cold February night in 2004? Did she run away to start a new life, only to meet with tragedy somewhere else? Was she the victim of a crime of opportunity by someone who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? Did she succumb to the elements while trying to escape what she perceived as legal trouble? Or is there another explanation entirely? Something so unexpected that investigators haven't even considered it. The truth is, we may never know. But the case of Maura Murray serves as a haunting reminder that sometimes people step out of their ordinary lives and into the unknown, leaving behind only questions that may never be answered. Her family continues to search for answers. Investigators continue to follow leads. And somewhere out there, the truth about what happened to Maura Murray during those 17 minutes remains hidden, waiting to be discovered. Until that day comes, Maura Murray remains frozen in time, a 21-year-old nursing student who vanished into thin air, leaving behind one of the most perplexing mysteries in modern American history. The case stands as a testament to the fact that in a world where we think everything can be explained, some mysteries endure. Some questions remain unanswered, and some people, like Maura Murray, simply disappear without a trace, leaving us to wonder what really happened when no one was watching.